Good evening, Bahamas. Coming up tonight, a man gunned down in the capital last night, adding to the country's high homicide count. Plus, a grand Bahamian doctor says the Bahamas will be underwater in 100 years. The effects of climate change are real. And from the pit to the palace, we have the story on well-loved former Deputy Prime Minister Cynthia Mother Pratt. Stay tuned. Welcome to Our News and thanks for joining us. I'm Jamila Mizik. Topping news tonight, a man is dead following the country's latest homicide. Sometime around 7:30 p.m. yesterday, police were called to 6th Street and Ponciana Avenue to investigate a shooting incident. Officer in charge of the Criminal Investigation Department, Chief Superintendent Michael Johnson, addressing media on the scene.
The victim was standing in the area of this community center when the occupants of a gray, what we believe is a Japanese model vehicle, pulled up. Two males exited that vehicle, both armed with handguns. They approached the victim and shot him multiple times about the body. These males then gone back into this vehicle and proceeded north on 6th Street, making good their escape. Again, like always, we appeal to members of the public, especially residents of this close-knit community, that if they have seen anything, to contact the police.
Now, according to police, the victim is believed to be in his mid-30s and is a resident of the community. Johnson says he was recently released from prison, being electronically monitored by order of the courts on homicide charges. Meanwhile, over 2,000 students receiving uniform assistance this school year from the Ministry of Social Services and Urban Development. That confirmation coming from Social Services Minister Obi Wilchcombe. But he says what is concerning is that many students are going to school without breakfast, and adds that the ministry is now putting a plan in place to provide assistance.
When children are at school in the morning time, you really expect them to be taking in much information and they're hungry. So, I mean, we're trying to find a way to fix that as well.
Climate change, the focus at a town hall meeting at the Zion Baptist Church in 8 Mile Rock. The meeting, hosted by the Ministry of Health and Wellness, attracting a number of people from various sectors on the island. Senior Medical Officer in the Ministry of Health and Wellness, Dr. Calais Philippe, says it is believed that in 100 years the Bahamas will be underwater.
Because the sea level is going to rise, because, well, we've seen the sea level rise already. Then you saw it in Dorian. People saw 20 feet, 15 feet water where they'd never seen it before in their entire life, right? It receded, but you can see the significant damage, and people are still responding to that as well, right? So we want you to start to look at your house and your community with a lens and an understanding of how you are going to adapt to the climate change events that are coming.
She says preparation for climate change is key and believes the response from the crowd was positive.
They responded about their concerns. I think some of the fears of the reality of needing to evacuate, how they're going to evacuate, when, how many people, what it's going to cost, the inevitability that someday this space is going to be covered with 8 to 10 feet of water, and what will people do? What is the plan? And I think that was real. I think there was a real communication about how we need to work together, public, private, government, but also how we need to reach the younger people to get engaged.
It is International Open Access Week, a week celebrated internationally to promote the open access to scholarly information. And in commemoration of the week, the University of the Bahamas has released a volume 28 of the International Journal of Bahamian Studies. UB Nursing and Health Sciences librarian Virginia Balin says Bahamian scholars and many others around the world will now have access to information about the issues that impact Bahamian society.
The journal is a peer-reviewed journal. Scholarly papers are received by the editor, and we send them out for peer review, and then we publish them. And we only publish 1 volume per year. And it's always released during Open Access Week because it is an open access journal. So the information in the articles is immediately available to anyone, anywhere who has an internet connection.
She says local and international professors are contributors to the journal, and the journal has 5 original articles.
We are trying to publish papers which have a Bahamian theme or a little bit wider Caribbean theme. There is no other academic journal in the world which focuses on Bahamian studies. So that's our niche. It's appropriate that it comes out of the University of the Bahamas, and it's appropriate that it's open access. In other words, you do not have to have a subscription to the journal in order to read the articles.
Still to come on our news, the Brave 11. Our Marlena Leonard features one of them just ahead of Veterans Day. And U.S. President Joe Biden calls the attack on Paul Pelosi despicable. That's coming up when our news returns. Well into this year's remembrance season, and the British Legion Bahamas branch has said that this year the focus is on their female veterans, more commonly known as the Brave 11. As part of an ongoing series, our Marlena Leonard sat down with 2 of the children of the late Lady Zoe Maynard for more on their mother's legacy and service. Here's the story.
A passage in the first chapter of Ruth Clark Goodridge's book, The Brave 11, describes how young the 11 Bahamian women were when they enlisted in the Auxiliary Territorial Services, most in their early 20s, and one of the volunteers had just arrived at her 18th birthday. That youngest volunteer was Zoe Cumberbatch. Then known for being the youngest student enrolled and to graduate from government high school, she would later become known as Lady Zoe Maynard. We were lucky enough to sit down with 2 of Maynard's children, Allison Gibson and Clement Maynard III, to tell us about their trailblazing mother.
In my view, she was ahead of her time in terms of the kind of woman that people speak about today, you know, being able to manage many things, household, career. She had a career. She managed a husband who was busy, and she managed a large family of 5. And she did it very, very effectively. She was able to manage and multitask. I think a lot of that, actually, that ability to multitask came about beginning at what she had to endure at the time of the war.
Gibson says her mother's time in the ATS had undeniable ties to her love for democracy.
I do think it influenced her going into the secretarial field, the Morse code and all of that. And I think that it influenced her. She was the first female juror in the Bahamas. I don't know whether you're aware. And I think that the whole value of democracy, the rule of law, came from, that was in her, which is, I think, helped her to volunteer, to preserve democracy, freedom. And the same thing in the legal system. I think that Mommy recognized that there's this civic responsibility. We were always encouraged as children to give back. We couldn't just sit on our laurels. We had to give back.
They can both recount many fond memories of reunions between the 11 women.
There was Aunt Shirley Wright. She was hilarious. She used to come by a whole lot and always had so much fun. And then Miss Fountain, Dorothy Wisdom was in. Of course, Mrs. Jan Major's mom. They would get together. I wouldn't say like every year, but there was no question in my mind growing up that they had a close bond.
To help the British Legion Bahamas branch in assisting remaining Bahamian World War II veterans or veterans' widows, support their poppy sales this remembrance season. Reporting for Our News, I'm Marlena Leonard.
The photo you are looking at shows members of the media working next to police tape outside the home of U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, where her husband Paul Pelosi was violently assaulted after a break-in at their house yesterday. U.S. President Joe Biden said the attack on U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband on Friday was despicable, and everybody needs to stand up against violence in politics. Biden said enough is enough is enough, and that every person of good conscience needs to clearly and unambiguously stand up against violence. When our News Weekend edition comes back from the break, it's all coming together for Exuma residents who are quite pleased about roadworks and infrastructure, giving that island a much-needed facelift. Plus, it's homecoming time down in Prairie View, Texas, and the Bahamas Prairie View alumni chapter is in the mix. The details are on the way after this quick break. Month makes 16 years since the Keep Grand Bahama Clean Committee has been pushing the message of cleanliness on that northern island. GBPA Vice President of Building and Development Services, Nikira Wilchcomb, says the message is still relevant today, and they continue to appeal to motorists to stop the littering
as they drive, to keep their garbage within their vehicles. Use a bin to put it in is our chant that we normally say, and so there's so much effort being spent on roadside cleanup of litter on our island, and so we really want to say to persons who are driving, refrain from this activity. Hold the garbage until they get to a place that they can responsibly throw the garbage in, because it's sad when an area gets cleaned and we have to go right back, not even the next day, the same day.
Wilchcomb says indiscriminate dumping throughout the community remains a concern for the committee as well, especially on or near beaches.
We look at our beaches, they're frequented by our residents, and so we want to make sure that that land debris stays on land, as you said, and dispose of it correctly before it harms our marine life. And so this is a constant effort. So we work with both marine organizations also to be involved with our cleanups as well.
As roadworks continue on Exuma, local government chief councilor Kendall McPhee says the tone of residents has changed. He said early on there were numerous complaints due to the disruption caused by the ongoing works, but that's no longer the case.
A lot of complaints have died down now from before it started, and now they are happy of seeing what's going on. Because now we have strips of road already paved, and it's just a minor one side, not one side paved. So not too much complaints now.
Upgrades are the result of a public-private partnership between the government and the Bahamas Striping Group of companies. The goal is to redo over 50 miles of road on Exuma. There's also the construction of bleachers, bathrooms, and a new track for the local high school. Family Island Administrator Christian Palacios says the project means a lot to the island.
Having a facility like this means that the students would have better means of practicing, better means of advancing in sports. One thing that I've noticed since coming to Exuma is a very athletic community. It prides itself on competitiveness in sports. And this project is one of many, actually, that Bahamas Striping Group of companies have been doing in the community.
Introducing the world-famous Prairie View A&M University's marching band. Yes, it's homecoming time down in Prairie View, Texas, and our Bahamas Prairie View alumni chapter is there joining in the celebrations. There's the float driven by Bahamian alumni Dr. Margaret Waters. In sync with the country's 50th anniversary of independence next year, the Bahamas and Prairie View University will celebrate the 50th year of Bahamian students being enrolled in that institution institution. We want to say thank you and a very happy birthday to Vernita Harris, also of the Bahamas Alumni Chapter, for providing us with video and images of the homecoming celebration. And a special hello to our Texan friend Claude Brown of the Prairie View Trail Ride Association. Good going there, Panthers. Just after the break, a look at weather over the next few days. And from the pit to the palace, the Mother Pratt story. That's coming up when Our News Weekend Edition comes back from the break. Welcome back to Our News. Balmy breezes outside on a relaxing Sunday. Let's take a quick look at the weather over the next few days. She is one of the most prominent women in Bahamian history, as she was the first woman to become the acting Prime Minister of the Bahamas. Cynthia Mother Pratt says her life has not always been easy, as she's had many struggles but also much success. I spoke with Mother Pratt, who shared with me her journey from the pit to the palace.
I don't know what it is to live in the suburbs. Never had the privilege.
Cynthia Mother Pratt came from humble beginnings. The former Deputy Prime Minister of the Bahamas says life has not always been a bed of roses, growing up with her 15 siblings and her mother, who battled with Alzheimer's.
That's why I continue to encourage women. Don't get discouraged. You're down, but you're not out. Cast down, but you're not destroyed. Yes, they often speak negatively about your woman and go sit down and you can't do this and you can't do that. So you stop to think of what I went through as Minister of National Security and being in charge of men. So you could imagine. And I had to be strong to let them know it's not about the gender. It's about what's inside of me, and it must come out.
Throughout her life, Mother Pratt has served in several capacities, including being a nurse for some 14 years. Years later, in 1997, she became the Member of Parliament for St. Cecilia. She says it was important for her to make a difference in her community.
That's all I needed. I needed an opportunity. I was given an opportunity, and I took advantage of that opportunity. And so whenever I hit a stone wall, I look back and see where God has brought me from. I can't stop now. I'm going to press on until I reach my goal.
The now Deputy Governor General is encouraging women in leadership to stay firm and always do what is right.
In leadership, it's lonely at the top. You don't know who to trust. And when you're at the top, you have to make decisions. The decisions is for the country, not for my friend, not for my family. It's for the country.
Thank you for joining us for Our News Weekend Edition. On behalf of the entire team, I'm Jamila Mizik. Have a wonderful evening.